She found him shivering in the rain and took him in like her own son. Years later, he became a man of power, forgetting the woman who once saved his life, until fate brought them face to face again. Before we dive into the full story, tell us in the comments which country you're watching this video from. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more heart-touching stories. Jolly pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders as the evening wind cut across the narrow lanes of the old city. At 54, her face carried the weathered lines of endless struggle. She had been a widow for nearly 20 years, and since then, life had become a daily challenge of survival. Each morning began with the same ritual, taking her worn basket, stepping into the crowded streets, and praying that today would bring enough coins to buy food for herself. The smell of damp earth mixed with fried snacks from street vendors. The sounds of car horns and chattering neighbors created a cacophony she had grown accustomed to. But despite the noise, there was a certain emptiness that lingered in Jolly's chest, a quiet, aching solitude that never left her, even when surrounded by people. She was counting her coins when she noticed a small figure huddled near the corner, hidden beneath a tattered umbrella. A boy no older than 8, with wide, frightened eyes peeking out from under his hair. He looked lost, shivering from the cold drizzle. "Hey," Jolly said softly, bending down. Are you alone?" The boy flinched at her voice, glancing around as if expecting someone or something to appear from the shadows. I don't have anyone," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. Her heart tightened. Something in that small, fragile presence stirred a protective instinct she hadn't felt in years. "Come with me," she said gently. I'll take care of you." He hesitated, then slowly nodded. Jolly led him through the wet streets to her small, cramped home, which smelled faintly of damp wood and stale tea. It wasn't much, but it was warm. She made him sit by the small stove while she boiled water for tea. The boy's hands were icy, his lips chapped from the cold. "What's your name?" she asked as she handed him the cup. Carlo Venti," he said quietly. "Carlo," she repeated, smiling softly. "That's a strong name for such a small boy." From that day on, Jolly's life took on a new rhythm. She fed him, clothed him, and most importantly, gave him the chance to go to school, a privilege he had never known. Every morning, she walked him to the bus stop, waited until he was safely on the bus, then went to beg for a few coins herself. She knew the world could be cruel, but she wanted him to see beyond the harshness, to dream bigger than the streets that had trapped him. Years passed. Carlo grew into a bright, ambitious young man, excelling in school with Jolly's quiet encouragement. She celebrated his achievements with small, humble gifts, a new notebook, a clean shirt, a pat on the back. But as he grew older, something began to change. The very world she had prepared him for started to pull him away from her. He got scholarships, moved to bigger schools, made new friends, and soon the visits home became rare. He called less and less, and the warmth that had once been a constant part of their small home grew colder. Jolly noticed the absence, but she told herself it was because he was building a life, chasing dreams she had always imagined for him. One day, years later, Carlo called to tell her he had married. His voice was polite, distant, a formal echo of the boy she had once cared for so deeply. "Her name is Florina," he said. "We're moving into our new home soon." "Florina," Jolly repeated, forcing a cheerful tone. "That's lovely, Carlo. I wish you both all the happiness in the world." He paused, then said, "Thanks, Jolly. Take care of yourself." And just like that, he was gone. The silence of her house grew heavier. She thought of him every day, the little boy who had once clung to her under that tattered umbrella. She remembered the cold nights she had spent by the fire, making sure he was warm, fed, and safe. Yet the man he had become seemed to have no memory of her sacrifices. Years later, she dreamt of him. In her dream, he was a child again, looking lost and frightened, and she was holding him close, whispering promises she had kept for decades. But in the dream, she saw herself older, weaker, struggling to move through a world that no longer cared for her. And when she woke, the ache in her chest was sharper, as if the dream had been a warning. Meanwhile, Carlo was building a life with Florina. He was successful, respected, and yet something gnawed at him, a vague, uncomfortable emptiness he could not name. Florina noticed his restlessness and asked about his family, but Carlo brushed it off, speaking instead of work, achievements, and the future. Florina, curious and caring, began to dig into Carlo's past. She spoke to his old neighbors, found scraps of information, and slowly, like a puzzle falling into place, discovered the story of the woman who had raised him. The sacrifices, the love, the quiet suffering that had shaped him. She confronted him gently one evening, showing him old letters and photographs he had long forgot. "Carlo," she said, her voice trembling, "this woman, she loved you more than anyone. You left her behind. You've hurt her." Carlo's world tilted. Memories he had buried surfaced. The small hands he had held, the warmth of her smile, the countless nights she had waited for him to come home from school. He felt guilt so profound it almost overwhelmed him. I didn't know," he whispered, tears filling his eyes. I thought she was always strong. I thought she didn't need me." "She needed you," Florina said softly. "She needed to know she wasn't forgotten." Carlo knew what he had to do. He returned to the small home where Jolly still lived, now older, frail, and struggling. The streets smelled the same, the sounds were the same, yet time had changed everything. She looked up when he entered, eyes wide, heart racing. "Carlo?" she asked, voice shaky. He dropped to his knees before her, tears streaming freely. "Mother, I'm so sorry. I forgot, and I never should have. Please forgive me." Jolly's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out, touching his face with trembling hands. "Carlo, it's okay," she whispered. I never stopped loving you." The reunion was quiet but filled with a lifetime of unspoken emotions, regret, forgiveness, love, and the relief of finally being seen again. Carlo realized that no success, no achievement, no life could replace the bond he had with the woman who had given him everything. Florina stood nearby, holding his hand, understanding the depth of what had been lost and the beauty of what had been restored. And for the first time in many years, the small home was filled with laughter, warmth, and a sense of peace that had seemed impossible. Jolly sat back, exhausted but content, watching the boy she had raised now embrace her, truly, fully, as a mother deserves. And Carlo, holding her hands, promised himself he would never let her be forgotten again. The morning sun streamed weakly through the dusty curtains of Jolly's small home. The air smelled faintly of tea leaves and old wood, mingling with the faint scent of rain from the previous night. Jolly stirred slowly, feeling the aches in her joints that had grown sharper with age. Her hands, once strong and nimble, now trembled slightly as she moved to the small wooden table. Carlo had insisted on staying the night after their reunion. His presence filled the house in a way that seemed to breathe life back into it. Yet even as he sat quietly in the corner, sipping tea, his eyes darted around nervously, as if the weight of his past had become visible, pressing down on him from every corner. "Mother," he said softly, breaking the silence, I don't even know where to begin." His voice wavered, cracking with emotion he had long ignored. Jolly smiled gently, placing a wrinkled hand over his. "Carlo, you don't have to say anything, just be here. That's enough for me." Carlo could not remain silent. He had carried the guilt like a heavy stone in his chest for years. "I left you," he whispered. I went to school, to work, I built my life, and I forgot you. I didn't call, I didn't check, I let you struggle alone. How could I have been so blind? Jolly shook her head, her eyes misty. Oh, Carlo, life is cruel, yes. But you were just a boy once, scared and small. I never wanted to hold your dreams back. I just wanted to make sure you had a chance. She paused, taking a deep breath, even if it meant I would be alone. Carlo's throat tightened. He looked down at the table, the wooden surface worn from years of use, and remembered all the nights she had spent waiting for him to come home, all the mornings she had risen before dawn to prepare him for school. Every scrap of food, every coin begged, every small sacrifice, it was all for him, and he had been blind to it. I thought I was doing this for you, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to succeed, to make you proud, but I didn't realize. I had to make sure you were safe too. Jolly reached over, brushing his hair back from his forehead. Carlo, love, you made me proud every single day. Not because of your grades, not because of your work, but because you survived, because you kept going, because you remembered kindness, even when life tried to crush you. That was enough for me. Carlo swallowed hard, tears pooling in his eyes. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of her love and the full depth of his own negligence. Days turned into weeks, and Carlo remained in the small city, trying to reconnect with the woman who had given him everything. He found himself sitting with her for hours, listening to her stories about the streets, the people she had met, the struggles she had faced. He realized how much of the world he had missed, how little he had understood the sacrifices behind his own success. Florina watched quietly from the doorway, her hands folded, observing the tender moments between mother and son. She had always wondered about his past, but seeing it unfold before her eyes, seeing the warmth, the quiet strength of Jolly, touched her heart deeply. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city lights began to flicker on, Carlo and Florina walked along the narrow cobblestone streets. Rain had left the stones slick, reflecting the golden glow of the street lamps. Carlo, Florina said softly, I never realized the woman who raised you, she gave you so much, even when you were away from her. I think you owe her more than you know. Carlo's hands clenched at his sides. I know, he said bitterly. I don't think any amount of apologies, any amount of time can ever make up for what I've done. Florina placed her hand gently on his arm. You can try. You can start by being here now, by listening, by loving her as she deserves. She's still alive, Carlo. And she's waiting for you to truly see her. Her words struck him deeply. He thought back to the dreams he had ignored, the faint echoes of a woman's love calling to him through the years. And he knew she had waited, silently, patiently, despite the pain of being forgotten. Back in the small home, Jolly sat by the window, her hands folded over her lap. She watched the rain trickle down the glass, listening to the distant chatter of the city. In her mind, she replayed memories of Carlo as a boy. The first time he ran to school without fear. The first time he came home with a book he had read entirely on his own. The small victories that had been the bright spots in her lonely days. When Carlo returned that evening, he found her humming softly to herself, a tune she had taught him as a child. The sound was faint, but it filled the room with a warmth that no success or achievement could ever replicate. He knelt before her once more, taking her hand in both of his. Mother, he said, voice breaking, I am so sorry. I don't deserve you, but I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel forgotten again. Tears rolled down Jolly's cheeks, and she pulled him close, embracing him with all the strength her frail body could muster. Carlo, my child, you're here now. That's all I need. In the following weeks, Carlo began to bring Florina into their world. She listened to Jolly's stories, learned about the streets, the hardships, and the little joys she had discovered along the way. She began to understand the depth of the bond between mother and son, and she saw in Carlo a transformation she had never imagined: the guilt, the love, and the determination to make amends. One afternoon, while cleaning the small garden outside the house, Jolly paused and looked at Carlo. "You've changed," she said softly, her eyes searching his. "You've grown into a man who sees, who feels, who understands." Carlo smiled faintly, feeling the weight of her words. "I had a teacher who taught me everything, you mother. You taught me more than any school ever could." Jolly's hands shook slightly as she touched his cheek. "And you taught me patience, Carlo. Even when I thought I was alone, I learned to hope for the future through you." Florina, watching from the doorway, felt her heart swell. She realized that this story, this family, was not just about guilt and forgiveness. It was about resilience, about love that endured, about the power of acknowledgement and presence. Weeks later, Carlo decided to take Jolly on a trip she had always dreamed of, a visit to the countryside she had loved as a girl. The day was crisp and clear, with the scent of wildflowers in the air and the distant hum of bees. Jolly held Carlo's hand tightly as they walked along the grassy fields, her eyes shining with a mixture of joy and disbelief. "I never thought I'd see this again," she said softly, looking around. I thought I had lost it all." Carlo shook his head. "No, Mother, you never lost it. You only needed me to remember to come back to you. And now I am here." She smiled, feeling the warmth of his hand, the steady beat of his heart. The years of hardship, of struggle, of silent sacrifice seemed to melt away in that moment. She realized that though the world had been cruel, love, real, enduring love, could still prevail. Yet even in these moments of joy, a shadow lingered in Carlo's mind. The years he had spent forgetting her, the opportunities he had squandered, the pain he had caused, all of it weighed heavily on him. He knew that rebuilding trust would take time, patience, and unwavering dedication. And as the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the fields, Jolly felt a quiet hope bloom within her chest. She had been forgotten once, but now, finally, she was seen. And for the first time in decades, she allowed herself to believe that love, forgiveness, and family could truly heal even the deepest wounds. The first chill of autumn had begun to seep into the city, turning the once golden afternoons into gray, misty evenings. Leaves fell in slow spirals from the old trees lining the narrow streets, scattering across puddles of rainwater from the previous night. Jolly's small home smelled faintly of burning wood and chai, a comfort against the creeping cold. She sat by the window, gazing at the scattered leaves, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup. Carlo had returned that morning after a long day at work, but unlike before, he stayed late into the evening. He had begun bringing Florina more often, and together they would listen to Jolly recount stories from her youth, the trials she faced as a widow, and the quiet, lonely nights when all she had was hope for her son. "Mother," Carlo said, breaking the silence, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." His voice carried a weight she hadn't heard in years, a mix of uncertainty and resolve. Jolly looked at him, curious but calm. "What is it, Carlo?" He hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. I want to understand everything. I want you to tell me from the beginning how it was, how you survived, how you managed everything." Her eyes softened. "Carlo, it wasn't easy. There were nights I went without food, nights I wondered if I would even see the sunrise. And yet I survived because I believed in you. You were my reason." Carlo swallowed, his throat tight. I never truly realized what you went through. I was so focused on my life, my work, that I didn't see you. I didn't see the sacrifices, the pain. And now I feel like I've lost so much time." Jolly reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand. "Time, it's never truly lost if you still choose to be here now. I waited for you, Carlo, and you came back." Standing quietly in the doorway, watched the exchange with a mixture of awe and sadness. She had always known that Carlo had a past, but the depth of his mother's love, the years of silent endurance, struck her in a way she had never anticipated. She moved closer, placing a hand gently on Carlo's shoulder. "You see now, don't you?" She whispered, "You weren't alone, and she was always here, waiting for you to come back." Carlo nodded slowly, tears forming in his eyes. "I see it now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and I will never forget it again." In the following days, Carlo immersed himself in repairing the bonds he had neglected for so long. He spent hours listening to Jolly's stories, learning about her struggles, and understanding the small victories that had defined her life. He realized that every moment he had taken for granted, the warm meals, the encouragement, the unwavering support, had been a gift far greater than anything he had achieved on his own. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the small home, Jolly fell ill. It began as a mild cough, but quickly escalated into a high fever. Carlo, panic rising in his chest, stayed by her side, tending to her with a dedication he had never shown before. Florina called for a doctor, and soon the house was filled with the antiseptic smell of medicine, the quiet hum of the heater, and the low murmurs of concern from both Carlo and Florina. "Mother," Carlo said, gently placing a hand on her forehead, "please, you have to fight. You can't leave me again." Jolly weakly opened her eyes, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Carlo, I've fought my whole life. I've survived worse than this. You are here. That's all that matters." Carlo could not accept her words as comfort. He knew she had been alone for so long, and the thought of losing her now, after finally reconnecting, was unbearable. "No," he said firmly. "I won't let that happen. You stay with me. You stay for good this time." Florina held Carlo's hand as he sat beside Jolly's bed, watching over her as she drifted in and out of sleep. The quiet moments were filled with unspoken emotions: regret, love, guilt, and hope. It was as if time itself had paused, allowing them to exist in this fragile space of reconciliation and healing. As the days passed, Jolly's condition slowly improved. Carlo remained by her side, learning the art of patience and care, realizing that the sacrifices he had ignored for years were lessons in humanity, in love, in endurance. Florina, too, became part of the small household rhythm, preparing meals, helping with chores, and offering quiet support that deepened the bond between them all. One evening, as they sat by the window watching the city lights flicker on, Carlo turned to Florina. I want you to know everything. About my past, about my mother, about the years I was blind to what truly mattered." Florina nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. "I want to know, Carlo. I want to be part of this, to help you honor her, to make sure she never feels forgotten again." Carlo felt a weight lift from his chest, a burden he had carried for years. He began to speak, recounting memories he had buried, the small triumphs, the fears, the moments of connection he had ignored. Jolly listened quietly, her eyes reflecting both pride and sorrow. Each story brought tears, laughter, and sometimes silence, as the magnitude of their shared history settled around them like a gentle, unyielding presence. One night, Carlo had a vivid dream. He saw Jolly, older and frail, standing alone in a darkened street. The wind whipped around her, carrying leaves and rain, and yet she stood tall, waiting. He ran toward her, calling her name, but she did not move, did not respond. And then he awoke, heart pounding, breath quick, Realizing the depth of his fear and guilt, he sat by the window, staring into the night, and whispered, "I will never let you be alone again, Mother. Never." In the days that followed, Carlo and Florina worked together to restore the small home, bringing light, warmth, and life back into its corners. They painted the walls, cleaned the floors, and even planted a small garden outside, where Jolly could sit and watch flowers bloom. It was more than just a physical restoration. It was a renewal of love, care, and family bonds that had been frayed by time and neglect. Florina, moved by the strength and resilience of Jolly, often found herself staying late into the evenings, helping with chores and learning stories from her past. She began to understand the depth of Carlo's upbringing, the sacrifices that had molded him, and the quiet heroism of a woman who had given everything for someone else's happiness. One afternoon, as the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the room, Carlo took Jolly's hand in his. "Mother," he said softly, "I don't want to just make up for lost time. I want to be here for you every day to show you that your sacrifices were not in vain, that your love was not forgotten." Jolly's eyes shimmered with tears. "Carlo, my child, you are here now. That's all I ever wanted. Nothing else matters." And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of their renewed bond, Carlo realized that life had given him a second chance, not just to succeed, but to truly honor the woman who had given him everything. The night fell gently over the city, the streets quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of life. Inside the small home, Jolly, Carlo, and Florina sat together, a family bound not by circumstance, but by love, understanding, and the power of redemption. And for the first time in many years, they felt whole, complete, and finally at peace. The winter had arrived quietly, covering the city in a thin, crisp frost that sparkled under the pale morning sun. The streets were quieter than usual, and the air carried the sharp scent of smoke from neighborhood chimneys. Inside Jolly's home, warmth radiated from the small stove, filling the room with a sense of comfort and peace that had been absent for so long. Jolly sat by the window, a thick shawl draped over her shoulders. She looked older than before, her body more fragile, yet her eyes held the same strength and gentle pride that had carried her through decades of hardship. She watched the snowflakes drift lazily down, their delicate patterns reminding her of fleeting moments in life, moments of joy, loss, struggle, and love. Carlo entered the room quietly, carrying a tray of tea. "Mother," he said softly, placing it beside her, I wanted to make sure you had something warm before it gets colder outside." Jolly smiled faintly. "Carlo, you've done more than that already. Just having you here is more warmth than any tea could provide." Carlo knelt beside her, taking her hand in both of his. "Mother, I've realized something these past months. I didn't just forget you. I took for granted every little thing you did, every sacrifice you made. I was blind to love, to life, to what really mattered." His voice trembled, laden with years of guilt and remorse. "You weren't blind," Jolly said quietly, squeezing his hand. "You just had to learn, and you have. That's what matters. You came back. That's enough." Florina entered at that moment, carrying a small basket of bread and fruits. She stopped in her tracks, taking in the scene, the tender way Carlo held Jolly's hand, the look of profound love and regret in his eyes, the frailty and quiet dignity in Jolly's expression. She felt her own eyes well up. "You too, I see it now," Florina said softly, "the bond you share. It's unbreakable even after all these years." Jolly looked at her, her voice gentle but firm. "Florina, you have been a blessing to him, and to me, you see him, you care for him, and that matters more than anything." Florina knelt beside Carlo, placing a hand on his arm. Carlo, you don't have to fix the past. You just have to be here now for her and for yourself. Let her love remind you who you are. Carlo nodded, tears spilling freely. I will, Florina, I promise. I will never let her be forgotten again. The days that followed were filled with small but profound moments. Carlo helping Jolly walk in the snowy courtyard, Florina reading aloud stories she had learned about Jolly's youth, and all three of them sharing meals, laughter, and quiet reflection by the stove. Each day, the bond grew stronger, as if the years of absence had been a test and they had finally passed. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Carlo sat with Jolly, looking through an old photo album. Each page brought memories flooding back, the small boy with wide eyes, clutching her hand, the first day of school, the nights she stayed awake with him during storms. I can't believe how much time I wasted, Carlo said softly, tracing a finger over his childhood photograph. I forgot everything that mattered most. Jolly reached over, brushing his hand gently. Carlo, you didn't forget. You came back. You are here now. That's all that counts. Florina, sitting nearby, whispered, and now we make sure the future is different, that she never feels alone again. Winter gave way to spring, and with it, the small home blossomed with life. Jolly's health improved steadily, aided by Carlo's constant care and Florina's attention. Flowers bloomed in the little garden, and laughter echoed through the small rooms once more. The city beyond continued its bustling rhythm, but inside the home, time seemed to have slowed, allowing love, healing, and connection to flourish. One bright afternoon, Carlo took Jolly's hands in his, kneeling in front of her. Mother, I want the world to know you, to honor you, to show that every sacrifice, every hardship, every tear was not in vain. I will make sure your story is remembered. Jolly smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. Carlo, my child, that is all I ever wanted. Not recognition, not reward, just to be seen, to be remembered, to be loved. Florina stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Carlo's shoulder. You both deserve this peace, she said softly. You've earned it through love, patience, and forgiveness. Now live it fully. Carlo leaned forward, pressing his forehead to Jolly's hand. I love you, Mother, more than I ever knew I could. Thank you for never giving up on me. Jolly closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed by the emotions she had carried for decades. When she opened them, they shone with a warmth that lit up the small room. And I love you, Carlo, more than words could ever express. The snow outside had melted, replaced by a bright, clear morning. Birds chirped in the trees, the air was crisp and fresh, and the scent of blooming flowers drifted in through the open window. The home, once shadowed by years of struggle, now radiated with light, love, and a sense of completion. In the months that followed, Carlo and Florina made sure that Jolly's days were filled with comfort, joy, and purpose. They celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and simple everyday moments with laughter and care. Jolly taught Florina the recipes she had learned over decades, shared her stories of resilience, and imparted wisdom born from hardship and survival. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Carlo reflected on the journey that had brought them here. I can't believe how close I came to losing everything, he said softly. If I had never returned, if I had never remembered, I don't even want to imagine that life. Jolly reached over, placing her hand over his. Life has a way of testing us, Carlo, but love endures even when we falter. You see it now, and that's all that matters. Florina smiled, feeling the warmth and peace that had finally settled over their lives. We've all learned something, she said softly. That family isn't just blood. It's love, care, forgiveness, and the courage to come back when you've gone astray. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, Jolly closed her eyes, feeling the hands of her son and daughter-in-law holding hers. She thought of the long journey, from the rainy streets where she had found Carlo to the years of struggle, the dreams deferred and the pain endured. And she knew, finally, that the circle had been completed. Love had returned, forgiveness had healed, and she was no longer alone. Carlo whispered softly, his voice full of emotion, "Mother will never leave you alone again. I promise I'll be here every day." Jolly smiled, feeling the warmth of his words fill her heart. "And I will always be here, Carlo, always." Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, but inside the small home, time had paused in the most beautiful way. A family, once fractured by neglect and the passage of years, had found its way back to each other. And in that warmth, that laughter, that love, they discovered something far greater than success, wealth, or ambition. They discovered the enduring power of the heart, the home, and the bonds that never truly break. And as the night drew on, the stars twinkling above like tiny witnesses to their reunion, Carlo, Florina, and Jolly sat together in quiet contentment, knowing that no matter what challenges the future might bring, they would face them together, bound by love, forgiveness, and the lessons of a life fully lived.